For millennia, the West was guarded by the neo-samurai. Many were the firstborn children of criminals marked for death. Most were the children of other neo-samurai who were given the option of death or perpetual servitude at the age of 13. The Flannel Ronin was the product of King Morton and his concubine Yamile. Knowing the king to murder most of his non-royal offspring, Yamile went to the neo-samurai as soon as her son was born. They agreed to take the child in and hide him from the king. Yamile stitched a large red and green flannel blanket for her boy, which he kept and stitched into his first kimono at the age of 10. The boy was an anomaly amongst his peers. He never spoke. His fair skin and bright ginger hair were viewed as threatening, while his clothing deemed silly. Despite the rejections of his peers, he shined the brightest with all of the senseis, who were in awe of his speed, agility, quick memory, and flawless sight. He started going on missions with Master Oji and saw his first battle at the age of 11. After quelling a rebellion in San Vargas, the ruins of Las Vegas, the boy found a missing saber-toothed tabby cub. The poor creature had been starving for days. He approached the cat slowly to pet its forehead. When he made contact, a voice rang inside of his mind.
Please, help.
He cradled the cub, going off to reunite with his master. The saber-toothed tabby was the boy's first and dearest friend. He named him George, and the two were inseparable. The telepathic bond they had grew stronger. Eventually they could communicate back and forth to each other, though with very few words. George grew so large that the boy would ride him into battle. By the time the boy was 15, he had gained the respect of his peers, but they were still too intimidated to speak to him. The boy entered the meal quarters where George was waiting beside their usual table in the corner. He nodded to George.
Hello, George. Good to see.
When the boy sat down, the group of students closest to him migrated further away.
Mean people. It doesn't matter. Too nice.
Before he could respond, a girl with flowing ink-black hair entered the room. The boy was instantly stricken with a sense of euphoria and pain.
Wow. You hurt?
He noticed the girl began walking towards their table, but his concentration on her was cut by George's growling.
Don't growl at her. Not her. Look.
He stared at the rest of the mess hall. To the left, Rista, the blind neo-samurai, had his sword out at Gumbel, the doughy new transfer, who clutched his food tray with both hands shaking.
I mean you no disrespect. I only wish to.
The surrounding students laughed in unison. A wave of terror swept over Gumbel.
These tables are for the best belts only. You sit in the back. Apologies.
Gumbel turned around, only to trip over the extended foot of another student. The tray of food splattered all over the floor. Gumbel stood facing Rista, defiantly, until Rista extended his sword towards Gumbel's stomach.
You really want to try me, fat boy?
Another blade struck Rista from underneath. The boy was at the end of it, with the growling George in tow.
Stop this.
A silence hushed over the mess hall. This was the first time anyone had heard the boy speak out loud. Rista huffed as he withdrew his katana into his holster, then waved towards Gumbel.
Take him.
The boy, his cat, and his new friend returned to the table in the back. The mysterious female student was waiting for them. The three each displayed separate looks of shock or confusion.
Well, there was no way I was going to sit up there with them.
The boy slid his tray to Gumbel.
Are you sure?
The boy nodded.
1,000 thank yous.
Gumbel shoveled the rice and eggs into his mouth with wild abandon.
So what's your deal?
My father was sentenced to death today. He was an animator.
Firstborn?
And so it goes. I was processed this morning. You?
Been in and out of these places my whole life. I either escape or it gets raided by outsiders.
Sounds rough.
You get used to it.
Both the boy and George were dumbfounded. Up until this point, no one else could mind speak.
You can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Who are you talking to?
Gumbel was perplexed. The girl caught on to the oddness of the situation.
It's nothing. Sorry.
You're the only other person I met who could do this. Hey, I said person.
Yes, I heard you say person.
I don't think she can hear you, George. Good.
Who's George?
The boy patted the saber-toothed tabby on his head.
You can talk to animals? I can't do that.
Why is everyone so quiet?
I get the feeling that our new friend here is naturally quiet. I've just been thinking, you want to see a trick?
The rest of the table nodded.
This stays between us, agreed?
The girl surveyed the mess hall before extending her hand. The boy's cup moved from the other side of the table into her palm. She looked into the boy's eyes.
Teach me how to speak to animals, and I'll teach you how to do this.
Deal. The boy started the day with one true friend, and now he had 3. They trained together day and night. The boy made it his responsibility to bring Gumball up to fighting shape by teaching him stances, blocks, and how to put his entire weight into a punch. The girl taught the boy how to strengthen his mental abilities through mind communication and how to move things by pushing and pulling his will on objects. He mastered this ability over a 7-day period, but try as she might, at the end of 4 months of attempts, the girl could not speak to any animals. Students were allowed 1 pet. Most had to be kept in cages during after hours. It was only the boy's connection with George that granted the privilege for him to roam free, to the ire of the other students. After the 100th failed attempt to speak to George, the boy took the girl to the animal pen. He had not been there in years since he had got George. After he could speak to the saber-toothed tabby, a button was pressed. He could hear the voices of every animal, whether he liked it or not. The boy assumed that this would work in reverse for the girl, but walking through the halls she heard nothing, not the shouts from the wolves, the bribing of the reptiles, or the screams from the smaller rodents. She stayed persistent, even visiting the pen without the boy, yet nothing emerged. 3 years had gone by. The 3 were now known as the Unusuals, with the reputation of being as effective as they were strange. Gumball took it upon himself to train with the sumo assassins, where he learned to use his weight as a weapon, along with the training passed on to him by the boy. The girl became incredibly proficient in hand-to-hand combat. In truth, she had advanced her abilities to read her opponent's minds to foresee their attacks. The boy increased his mental ability to push and pull objects, so much so that he could open locked doors from great distances. On the eve of their graduation, the Unusuals were given a final team mission to take down Slooporg, a nefarious ring of black market tech suppliers in the subterranean streets of C at all. They infiltrated the group as wealthy film junkies interested in purchasing laserdiscs, quickly gaining admittance into the vault, a secret room made of red brick that housed every forbidden technology in the world. After trekking through the sewers, past the hundreds of vagrants and merchants, they reached a back alley where Lemoy, a small man with a bulging back, greeted them with a crooked-toothed smile.
Right this way.
Lemoy took them inside the back entrance of the nearby complex to a rickety elevator. The top floor of this building was the vault. The boy led the way. His eyes were forward, refusing to let his awe of all of these machines get in the way of his mission. The role he played was of a collector who saw these things all the time, not a neo-samurai who had never seen a monitor before, let alone stacks of them 10 feet high, serving as pillars, keeping the ceiling up. People were scattered across the room on switchboards, typewriters, and blocking screens with either green or orange text. George became uneasy and started to growl. Take it easy. Don't blow our cover. This place strange. It is what it is. How are you doing back there?
You can't hear them?
Hear who?
The machines. They're in my mind, speaking to me.
Some voices were happy, some angry, many sad. But they all shouted at the girl the moment she stepped out of the elevator. This was her pen, and she loved it.
Can any of you machines hear me?
Intruders, you have been recognized as 4 neo-samurai and a mutant feline. Engaging all defenses in silent 60-second countdown.
What are the machines saying?
Our cover is blown. We have less than a minute.
Perfect. Lemoy took the Luger out of his jacket, aiming it at the unusuals, ready to shoot. The boy used his thumb to raise the hilt of his katana blade from its holster. He swung, slicing Lemoy's hand. Neo-Samurai, this is an arrest.
Behind you!
The boy dived to the ground a split second before the double-barrel, rapid-round machine guns fired out the back of the room. Gumbel stepped in the way of 4 fleeing slooporgs, knocking them down like pins. The machine gun man burst through the shot-up steel doors. It had a rolling track under its torso. Its arms were made of iron instead of fingers, with tin muzzles. The girl attempted a line of communication.
Can you hear me?
Yes, not that it matters, intruder.
The girl leapt out of the way of the barrage of bullets the machine gun man sprayed at her. The machine gun man's torso spun 360 degrees, allowing the boy to slice up its back as the wires fell backwards onto the floor. The shooting stopped. The tech was all riddled with bullets, and 5 slooporgs now lay lifeless on the ground. Gumbel's decision to pile upon the remaining 4 slooporgs saved their lives. They burned down the vault as ordered, returning to the academy to find it too set to flames. The students and the senseis were gathered in the fields that lay before the academy, surrounded by the Kingsmen, other Neo-Samurai, and strangely enough, warriors from the east, all female, with copper helmets, flat in the front, covering their eyes, with a round oval shape in the back. The animal pen was burned in the fire set by the Kingsmen when they raided the academy, less than an hour before the unusuals returned. George was put in an iron cage, not too far from the boy and his friends. At dawn, King Morton arrived, as did Queen Polar Vortex of the East. The king wore his thick robe of fur. The queen in her eggshell white, skin-tight armor with glowing bright blue eyes. They strolled side by side into the center of the camp.
Let's make this quick, shall we? I do not wish to be in this part of the country longer than I have to.
By all means, have the first words, you wretched bone hag.
Good morning, everyone. How nice it is to have both sides together at last. The Neo-Samurai of the West, the Coppertone Sisters of the East, for the first, yet unfortunately, last time.
I have decided to disband the Neo-Samurai, and instead will institute the training of bounty hunters. The Queen is here to take all of the female students to the east. The males will swear their alliance to me by beheading a sensei. Anyone clinging to their old ways is implored to fall on their sword at this very moment, or be hunted for the rest of their days.
The Coppertone sisters separated the female students. The girl tugged on the boy's shoulder before she was approached.
Think we could take them?
I have a plan. Go with them for now. The senseis were on their hands and knees, with their heads low and arms bound behind their backs, facing their students. It was quiet enough to only hear the wind. Time passed slowly. A minute stretched into an eternity. The boy was the first to step out of the crowd, striding over to Master Oji, readying his blade. He raised his sword and swung, cutting his master's bonds.
The royals are without honor! My honor is to the code of the Neo-Samurai!
Master Oji looked up at his student with tears and a smile of pride.
You fool! You sweet fool!
An arrow from the king's archer shot out, hitting Master Oji in the chest. He collapsed into the mud.
Join me, brothers and sisters!
The students charged at their captors, disarming them, taking them down and freeing their senseis. The boy sliced through the lock to George's cage and rode him into battle. They tracked down the archer. George ran left and right, evading every arrow the archer had to spare, before pouncing on him, allowing the boy to sever the archer's head from his body. The boy, his cat, and the girl found each other at the center of the battle.
That was some plan. Anything beyond it, or is this it?
We need to find Gumbel.
Found him.
Gumball had gone to the other side of the battle. He marched directly towards King Morton. He was stopped by the 2 guards blocking the way with their giant axes.
I mean not to attack. I wish to pledge my loyalty to the King of the West.
Is that true, young man?
Yes, Your Majesty.
Then prove it. Bring me the head of the ginger boy who started all of this. The boy and the girl fought off many of the royal guards, while allowing others to escape as far away as they could. The 2 did not hold back on their gifts, pushing and pulling, while using their shared connection to anticipate and take down threats from all around them. In a moment they stopped face to face, wishing to attack on what had been building up between them for years, each going in for a kiss. When a flash freeze of ice engulfed the girl into a glacier, she was pulled back by Queen Polar Vortex.
You 2 are not the only ones with gifts.
The Queen had flash frozen all of the female students and boarded them into her airship. The boy readied himself when Gumball called out behind him.
Stop!
They have her. I must go.
Why couldn't you leave things be? What they wish is dishonorable. It's just change.
Not for the better.
The king wants your head. I'm sorry. As am I.
Gumball charged at the boy, who in turn evaded every punch. When Gumball widened his arms, the boy pressed his palm to his attacker's chest, using his mind to rocket him backwards so hard he formed a crater in the earth. The boy went to the Queen's airship, but it had already taken off. A storm of arrows rained down upon him. He leapt onto George, using his mind to propel them further into the air. After each surge George made, it was enough to escape the king's forces, but not enough to catch up to the Queen. They wandered the wastelands, traveling east in search of the girl, protecting people along the way from the king's forces in exchange for a meal or a place to stay, building up a network of other displaced neo-samurai, now Ronin, who fought to stay alive during the purge of the bounty hunters. After 10 years, George and the Flannel Ronin ran into Rista, the blind Ronin, a peer whose wife and daughter were recently abducted by the Coppertone sisters. The blind Ronin was determined to bring his wife and daughter back. The Flannel Ronin was honor-bound to help him on this path that finally led him to the east.
You just listened to The Flannel Ronin, Episode 3, The Flannel Ronin. This audio drama was written, performed, recorded, and edited by Drew Manning. If you enjoyed it, please stay tuned to this channel. Thank you for your time, and have a great one.